Hello, curling fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Broom Brothers, the official podcast of the curling group and the Grand Slam of Curling. And it couldn't come a moment too soon. It is our midweek Olympics preview. We are just about halfway through the curling event. The round robin is about 2/3 done, but in terms of number of days, we are at just about exactly the midway point of the curling event happening in Cortina, Italy right now, and no shortage of things to talk about. I certainly couldn't do it all myself. So here is the man himself. He has touched more granite than the quarry master at Ailsa Craig. It's Robbie Doherty.
Dude, what a week.
You're telling me,
I didn't know
brother.
there was so many experts on the rules of curling all over the world. It's great to see. Dude, if I watched, bobsled once every 4 years, I definitely know all the rules too and be an expert and make sure I share it as much as we've seen. So it's been a wild week as a curling fan and podcaster.
It has been crazy, so man. Cool. It's been so cool. Yeah. It was like legitimately the last 72 hours have been like some of the most stressful 72 hours of my life. It's like I've been doing hits for CBC, and then obviously you get calls from other. I've done some radio stuff. I'm also getting the number, like millions of texts from my friends. It's like everyone wants their own personal explanation of what's happening. You're like, oh my God.
John, you got to do what I did. Start charging your friends when they
exactly.
Ask
you. I tweeted that.
$20.
I said I'm going to start charging emotional labor for my time because it's getting out of hand. It's been truly wild, unlike anything we've ever seen. And it's funny, Robbie, because I believe we started the last episode by dunking on people online about their lack of knowledge of curling, and how could we know? That actually seems kind of like, I'm like wistful. Those people know more about curling than some of the people I heard from this week.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh my God.
Oh, and experts on the players, experts on, penalization, what should happen when rules are broken. It's very interesting to see.
Yeah.
But it's been a fun week, even aside from that. Even like there's a lot of surprises going on in both the men's and women's. I've been glued to it as much as I can. I've had 2 kids still sick with the flu and a wife who's now sick as well. So there's been some interrupted viewing, but you know what? I've been really enjoying it. There's been some great games. Some teams are hot, some teams are not. We'll get into it. And tell you what, it's nothing like the Olympics.
Nothing like the Olympics. That is for sure. Before we dive into it, a reminder, this episode is brought to you by Goldline Curling. Speaking of the Olympics, the official sponsor and provider of Canada's curling apparel at the Olympics. Those beautiful jackets and jerseys you see out there. I'm wearing my crew neck that's got the great logo on it here. That's all available. You can buy that. You want to support Team Canada from home. You want to have a memory of these Olympics. You can head on over to goldlinecurling.com. If you don't want the jacket or the performance shirt, they've got crew necks, they've got t-shirts, everything with that logo on it. So check it out. Lots of very cool stuff to support Canada at the Olympics at goldlinecurling.com. Okay, we are going to touch a little bit on the controversy a little bit later on in the episode when we talk about the men's side of the draw, because that's where it feels like it has all gone down. But as this episode comes out, I think perhaps now that it has kind of calmed down a little bit. We're recording this on Monday. This is going to come out hopefully kind of middle of the day, afternoon on Tuesday. So we don't know what happened in the Rachel Homan, Anna Hasselborg game this morning as you're listening to this. But as we're recording, I think probably the biggest story, especially for Canadian curling fans, is that the demise of Rachel Homan was greatly exaggerated. She was 1-3 going into Monday's slate of games against China and Japan. 2 good wins over both of those teams. She now sits 3-3. Robbie, on the women's side, we'll start with Rachel Homan. Your impression of her start and just how things have gone the last couple games.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and pretend, that all is hunky-dory and say that, she doesn't have a lot of work to do, but Rachel Homan is certainly not out of this competition, not by a long shot. And how many times have you and I sat on this podcast talking about whether it's a Grand Slam or any event that she's played in, and we've said the exact words, it's hers to lose. If Rachel plays well, she wins. That's how her game goes. And I hear a lot of my non-curling friends talk about that. No, Canada's struggling, and they were a favorite for gold and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. They did lose some pretty stupid games that they absolutely shouldn't have. They were up on Tirinzoni. They should have had that one. The United States game, same thing. But the reality is Rachel Homan has beaten all these teams so many times, and she's capable of doing it. You mentioned this is Monday, so we're talking a little bit in the future right now, but she just came off a 2-win day today, China and Japan, and she looked like she was just more comfortable. Especially, I just caught the highlights of the China game that was on extremely early my time, and caught the last bit of the Japan game today, and she's starting to look a little bit more relaxed. I don't know. I don't want to say the pressure's off her, because you're wearing the maple leaf at the Olympics in curling. The pressure's always on you. But they just look like they're starting to dial in a little bit more. They've got these 2 wins today to get them to 500, and they have a big one in the morning against Sweden. I think that is going to be the key game of the week for this team. Sweden's undefeated. They've been extremely sharp. We've talked about them how many times. They're an amazing team, but Rachel has beaten them numerous times over the years, and she's capable of doing it again. And I think that this is a real opportunity for Rachel and the team, obviously, to come out, refocus, play their game, build on those 2 wins today. And if they can ever give Hasselborg that first loss, that could be the start of a real momentum swing for Team Canada.
Yeah, no question about it. And so, yeah, as you're listening to this, that game is already over. So we're kind of giving you a little bit of premature thoughts here. But yes, as we go into that game, Anna Hasselborg at 6-0, Rachel Homan at 3-3. And I think even if Rachel Homan loses and drops to 3-4, there is still potential that she would find her way into the playoff picture. So not dead by any means if she loses to Hasselborg, but of course, if she beats Hasselborg, she has remaining games against Italy and South Korea, 2 games that I think are winnable games for them. And yeah, 6-3 would definitely get you into the playoffs in this field. And so, yeah, like I said, not all is lost. And I agree with what you said. I think going back to the start of the week, there did seem to be just a little bit of those Olympic nerves for Rachel. We had talked about that before the event, that was kind of the question mark. Hadn't played as good the last couple of slams, hadn't played as good this year, kind of in general. And again, when we say that, it's still an unbelievable record on the season coming into the Olympics. But for Rachel Homan standards, maybe a little lower coming into the Olympics. And then, of course, you have the history in 2018 and 2022. And it did look like when the event started, they were feeling that a little bit. I felt like, particularly, you can kind of tell, in my mind anyway, when Rachel's a little nervous because she gets a little over involved on the line calls. She kind of doesn't let Tracy do the work in the house. And she also doesn't trust the sweepers sometimes. Like, she'll call wait, so you see it like the rock gets down to the far hog line and she's saying sweep and it looks like it's all there. And I think most of the time, Sarah and Emma do a pretty good job of blocking out that for wait, and just doing their own thing. But yeah, early in the week, it just kind of felt like they were a little bit lost when it came to that. Like, you could tell the tensions were high. And then it felt like the day off came at exactly the right time. It felt like I watched both games. I stayed up late. I watched the China game. I watched the Japan game. I don't have children. So, so that's what I do. These curlers in a lot of ways are my children, but even if they're older than me, but yeah, so I watched both games and just the mood was different. It felt a little bit lighter. There was more communication too. I think Rachel and Tracy have a tendency, especially Tracy, she's a little quieter, and so when things aren't going well, she has a tendency to kind of just leave Rachel be and not really get involved in a lot of chatter. And I felt like watching the game this morning against China, the communication was ramped up. They were having a little bit more fun out there, and it showed. Rachel had her 2 best games of the tournament, like her specifically. And it's just, they're starting to kind of turn it around a little bit. It feels like Rachel Homan's last 2 games, 85%, 84%, compared to, 70 earlier in the week against Great Britain, 68 against Denmark. Like, she just feels more dialed in. So hopefully that continues for Team Homan. Obviously, yeah, Anna Hasselborg, the big one standing in their way. But, if you're a person who cares about this kind of thing, in the last 2 years, so since the start of or 2.5 years, since the start of the 2023 season, Rachel is 9-1 against Anna. So, you have to hope, if you're a Team Canada fan, that kind of boils over. But yeah, I think they're playing well, and we'll see if they can kind of just keep this rolling, keep the train on the tracks.
I couldn't agree more. And do you know what really did it for me? Like the thing I noticed today is in the last game against Japan, final end, she was up 2 with the hammer. They got into some trouble and missed her first double, which would have sealed the deal, would have gave her a make one go away situation sort of thing. Anyway, she missed it. Yoshimura made a nice come around with her last, and there was 3 Japan stones in the rings. Rachel didn't even look. She didn't look at the double because she just would have had to get rid of 2. It wasn't an easy double, but it was certainly makeable. But she didn't even consider it. She put the broom down, not scared to draw against the loss, put it down and put it on the side of the button. And that's a look of confidence from her. And what made me think of that was Emma and your comment about her just kind of trying to judge weight and those things. And you could see Sarah and Emma just dialed in on that draw, and it was perfect. And that was the thing for me that I noticed. Just, okay, she's starting to be Rachel Homan again, if that makes sense. And that's a scary thought for the other teams.
No doubt. So let's talk a little bit about the other teams in the field. So as we record this, Sweden sitting at 6-0, Korea, Switzerland, United States all at 4-2. Denmark is tied with Canada at 3-3. And then sort of on the outside looking in, you got China and Great Britain at 2-4, Italy and Japan at 1-5. We'll start at the top with Sweden. I think for me, again, we talked about it in the preview, like hasn't been the best year for Sweden. They lost the world spot to Isabella Vrano. They really haven't had an amazing year on tour, and they've just been electric. They've been so good. Anna in particular, way ahead of the field. She is 5% ahead of the next best skip in the field. Her low game on the week is 79. Her other games are 85, 82, 89, 91, 86. And so that's the Anna that you see when they're at the top of their game. It looks really, really good. Agnes Knockenhauer is also leading for seconds. And then Fia and Sarah are both kind of mid-pack. But overall team percentages as well, they're a full percentage point ahead of second. China somehow is the second team percentage in the field, which again shows you maybe how much the statistics mean. But yeah, overall, for me, it's, yes, the statistics don't mean everything, but when Anna's 5% clear of the field, that tells you everything you need to know.
Oh yeah, and some of those numbers are even low in my opinion. Like, she's been unstoppable. She looks like, not that the team, like you had mentioned that they haven't had the best season, but and I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on Team Hasselborg, because I think they're a great team and super, super awesome people. But, they haven't sort of been that same old scary Team Hasselborg in a few years that, terrified other teams. We used to have complaints from other teams at the Grand Slams because their walkout song was too intimidating. Like they were an intimidating figure out there and tough to play against. It just looks like Anna has that real true fire in her eyes again. And you can tell she's just the definition of dialed in. The only thing that scares me about that is the Olympics is such a long tournament, and it's so hard to keep those numbers up. I was also giggling when you were reading those percentage numbers off, because I just came off a week from my club curling playdowns, like out of my club, and like 86, like that's like a 4-end win. Like that just doesn't happen. Oh yeah. You said the Olympics, just making it look easy. But no, I agree. Agnes looks very strong. Sarah's been steady. But they have some big games coming up as well, as we talked about with Canada. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that momentum up. If they do, we talked about it in our preview episodes. They're a team who can certainly end up on top of the podium. Almost, I don't want to say a lock to guarantee themselves on the podium, but certainly a great team. But for me, it's just, can they keep that going? It's such a physically long time to just stay at your best, I find. A slam is Tuesday to Sunday. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. This is a week and a half for sure. And I mean, they're the one team, like they're probably already in the playoffs as we record this. They have games remaining against Canada, Korea, and China. And honestly, if they lose all three, they're probably still in the playoffs. They get a win in any of those games and they're in. So they're kind of the only team as we record this that's looking like a lock for the playoffs, which I think you and I both had them not finishing outside of the playoffs in our preview. Then we've got Korea and Switzerland. They're both at 4-2. I think that's about where we expected those teams to be, or at least in the playoff mix. Switzerland playing well. Seems like they've gotten a little bit unlucky with some of the losses that they've had. They lost to Denmark they lost to Japan and Sweden. So Sweden's the class of the field. Probably wouldn't expect them to lose to Japan, but overall, I think they're where they should be. Korea, the only thing I'm a little nervous about for them, does seem like Min-ji Kim is carrying the team. I've sort of talked at length on this pod about how good I think Min-ji Kim is, and I also think about them maybe pairing her up with Bobe Kong after this cycle is over and how scary that's going to be for the rest of the world. But yeah, if you look, Eunji Kim 8th among skips right now, Min-ji leading for thirds by 2% over her next opposition. And then Suji Kim is 6th for seconds and Yeun Seol is 8th for leads. So when you're talking about the team, Min-ji is kind of carrying the water over there. And again, it's like, how long can that last? And they also have a really tough finish coming up. They're already 4-2. They've lost to the USA and Denmark, and they finish with Switzerland, Sweden, Canada.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that is that kind of the same thing as I was talking about with Hasselberg is it's such a long week. And if Inji can really find her stride, like there's so many distractions at the Olympics. It's completely different than a World Championships or a Grand Slam or a Nationals, what have you. And you're right. It has, I don't want to say it's been a one-player team, but Kim has been definitely giving them a chance to win, and Eunji Kim is not performing her best, but they're still 4-2.
Yeah.
And if you can grind out those wins and the rest of the team can kind of pick their socks up, that could be the start of a real momentum builder for them, and they could go on a run. That team is very good. You know better than I do how good that team is. You know, they're not flashy. They certainly don't show off out there. They just kind of show up, know their role, do their job, and they win a lot of games. So to me, when I looked at the standings, that was a team that in my mind was, even though they're 4-2, they're almost kind of grinding, like their wins, they're more character wins, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, no, for sure. And like we said, they've lost to, Denmark and USA, who have had good weeks, but going into the Olympics, those aren't losses you would have expected Korea to have.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you mentioned the United States. That's a team that I can't wait to talk about.
Yes, well, that's who we're going to get to next because, I think Korea and Switzerland, they're kind of where we expected, but the USA sitting at 4-2, and they don't have a crazy difficult finish either, Robbie. Their 3 games remaining are Denmark, Great Britain, and then Switzerland. So yeah, they've already got wins over Canada and China. They beat Korea, as we said, so they would have a head-to-head tiebreaker against Korea and Canada if they end up in some kind of jumble of teams heading into the playoffs. So yeah, 4-2 for Tab Peterson. What do you make of that, Robbie?
Well, I called it the preview. Tab, when she heats up, she is deadly. Like she can make a lot of shots, and she's not scared to call them. I find there's just something, and please know there's nothing scientific about what I'm about to say, but it just feels like Team USA, like I don't mean the curling, I mean the whole Team USA, where summer games, winter games, wherever, when they go, there's just a different energy about Team USA. Their fans show up, they're loud. It's almost like they set the tone. I know that's stealing a line from Shorzy, but they really do. You can hear them in the building. And I think it translates to the curler. We saw it in the mixed doubles, obviously, with Corey Dropkin, especially. But Tab, or I should say Team Peterson, not just Tabitha, they just look so ready and so confident out there. I know they took another loss today, but I watched their entire game against Homan. And there was a couple times where you kind of expected that sort of Homan, maybe a greasy steal here, forced one, then get 3 and kind of pull away sort of thing. But Tabitha just didn't let it happen. And you can tell they're feeding off the crowd. They're comfortable with the ice. They're reading the ice well. And it's not the same Team Peterson that we're used to seeing, but whatever this version is, the Olympic version, they're very good. And you mentioned that's to me, that's a good chance of 2 wins out of their last 3 games, putting them in a really good position. And if those fans show up and they feed off that energy and they stay confident, I'm telling you, they're going to be tough.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, it feels like they got momentum from the Corey silver medal. Obviously,
Yes.
Corey is on this team and she's not having the best week. She's down in the bottom half of thirds. But I just think that in some ways has galvanized the US fans. They're kind of like, oh, our curling team's doing pretty well. Maybe we should go watch a game. Maybe we should be in the building. Flava Flav was there yesterday. As we know, Snoop Dogg showed up at the mixed doubles. So yeah, it is a pretty, I think there is something to be said for momentum. And it's interesting because I don't know if you'd necessarily think of momentum carrying over from one event to another, even with a player involved, but that does kind of seem like what's happening for them here. As we said, they got kind of a weaker version of Rachel Homan, and they took advantage of that, got a big win there, and they beat Korea. So yeah, in a really good spot. I want to get to the men. So just the last team we'll have a quick word on here is Denmark, because I think that's another team that's sort of outperforming expectations. They are sitting at 3-3, but they do have a tough finish. They play the USA, they play China, who is 2-4, but apparently the second best team according to percentages and right below them in the standings. And then they also finish against Switzerland. So still a team that maybe won't make the playoffs, but sitting at 3-3, I mean, obviously they had that tough loss to Canada, but they beat Korea, they beat Italy, they beat Japan. A nice start for the Danes.
Yeah, they're one of those teams that in our recap of the mixed doubles, we had a few teams that we called this. They're one of the teams I find that I just haven't seen a lot of.
Right.
They're not a team that I've been able to watch a couple close games, but we talked about how many times, Madeline Dupont, she's not that old, but she's got so much experience. She's seen the show before, and it could be a factor or a fact that she's just perhaps a little bit more comfortable on that Olympic stage than a lot of the other athletes based on experience. She's beaten Canada before at the Olympics. She beat them in 2018. So, that's a big win for a country like Denmark to beat, this. We talked about the maple leaf being a bullseye on your back or a target. And, she's accomplished that. So she's going to have to play well. That is a team that we talked about too, that they're just not perhaps quite at that level consistently of those top teams like Hasselberg, Homan, Tirinzoni. But you know what? Anything can happen. They're putting wins on the board. What are they, 3-3?
They're 3-3, yeah.
3-3. So yeah. So a chance to put at least 2 more wins on the board. You mentioned they do have a pretty tough finish, and I think they're going to have to keep, I don't want to say overachieving, but keep playing over their heads a little bit if they want to have a chance. But I don't know. I just, maybe I'm wrong. I still just don't see them going the distance.
I agree, but I just wanted to mention nice start for them. I think you and I both said there was a world where they could end up kind of the bottom of the pile, and that's obviously not going to happen. And I think it's really big for Danish curling. I think they don't really have a great men's team right now. And of course, Maddie Dupont has been carrying the flag, or in Denise's case, literally carrying the flag for Danish curling for so long now. And this kind of feels like her strongest team with Denise and Matilda and Jasmine. They've done well, and I hope they get at least one more win here before all is said and done. All right, let's move over to the men's side of things. And as we promised at the top of the episode, we will talk about all the controversy going on. Before we do, again, a reminder, this episode is brought to you by Goldline Curling. You may have noticed at the Olympics, a lot of teams using Goldline products out there on the ice because they are the choice of champions, the leader in curling equipment manufacturing. And of course, Hardline Curling also underneath the Goldline Curling umbrella now. So I don't always mention that when we talk about Goldline on these episodes, but important that I think almost every team in both fields are using either Goldline or Hardline brooms. So all of his equipments are available at goldlinecurling.com. Hardline is available on their own website, but also through the Goldline website. Brooms, shoes, gloves, pants, you name it, they've got it. Check it out, goldlinecurling.com. Broom.com. All right, Robbie, I have talked at length about the Broom controversy. I did. I've been working, or it's not Broom controversy, Boopgate, whatever you want to call it. Boop. I've kind of been at the center of it in some ways because I've been working for CBC. I did a long news hit for them. I just got off the phone with CBC News, like in print. They're doing like a big print feature on it. I've been reached out to by the Associated Press. I'm sure, you've been talking about it a ton too, but my opinions and stuff are already kind of out there. So I'm going to throw it over to you. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. What did you make of all of that, where we are now? Of course, I'll chime in as necessary, but I don't think we need to go strictly into the rules of all of it, but just maybe your take on just kind of the controversy in general.
I think it's an unfortunate situation. That's like as simple as I can make it. I think that an accusation like that on the biggest stage of the world, or in the world, I should say, I just don't think it's the place for it. Did Marc do it? I don't know. There was an iPhone video. Was there a finger out? Yes, it was. Can I confirm that that rock was moved or affected by that finger? No. And also, I should preface, am I someone who sits down and can memorize the official rule book of curling? No, I don't. But it's like
Robbie can't read. If you guys didn't know that, it makes doing the podcast really difficult.
just slower. I just have to slow it down a little bit. But it's just here's where I'm at. Whether it was mind games from Oscar or whether it was an honest violation, it just wasn't handled well. We have two world-class athletes representing their country, telling each other to fuck off, and I'm going to show you a video of you cheating right on, I guess it wasn't technically on air, but it was captured on cameras and it went all over the world. Like, we're not talking about the curling news here or, your local newspaper. We're talking about freaking TMZ and People Magazine. Now, is it cool that they're seeing the sport? Of course it is.
Sure.
But I'm like, does it not just kind of make us all look like a bunch of idiots in a way? Like, here's where I'm at. We had this happen. There was the fight. It was what it was. They called the officials out. The officials kind of walked out and just stood there. And then they called Brent. Is Brent Waldorf out?
Yeah. Waldorf,
and he just kind of stood there. And I'm just like, I feel like world curling, and again, I don't have a lot of background in this, but I just feel like, is it not them who should be setting the officials up for success and how to deal with these situations? I know it's something that's not common and we don't see it very often, but imagine a violation in football or hockey. Like, there's just going to be a ruling like that. Everyone knows what to do, and that's it. It just felt like amateur hour for the sport of curling. I will say, there's pictures and video come out. Marc Kennedy, like, he's 45 years old?
44.
He's been around for a long time. He's won everything there is in curling. That whole team, are they a little confident? Yeah. Are they, come off maybe a little bit as the bad guy? Sure. Is Marc Kennedy a cheater? Absolutely not, in my opinion. I liked what John Morris said. He's always been a world-class athlete, in my opinion. He's treated the other teammates, and I'm sure there's a lot of curlers who might disagree with me here, but anytime I've played him, he's been nothing but world-class, and mind you, he's probably winning 9-1 in the sixth end. But I just thought it was unfair that something like that turns a legacy to Marc Kennedy into a cheater. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's causing a lot of unnecessary distress on him. I mean, if I'm Oscar Eriksson and, we're not off to the start we wanted, you're in the Olympic Games, and you do notice something, of course you call it out, but I just think there's a better way to do it, a more responsible way and a more mature way. And it wasn't done. Again, Oscar had every right to call an official out, and they did earlier on, and then it all kind of escalated. I was actually on the ice in my own game when it happened. So I got off the ice, and I had like 25 text messages, and me, I check my social media once a week sort of thing, but like notifications everywhere. And I just think it's blown so out of proportion. We've got people who watch curling once every 4 years chiming in on it and making these accusations. I just think it's a sad situation.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think you're right. Like Brad Jacobs kind of mentioned today after their win against Czechia that, there's more eyeballs on the sport now than probably there ever has been. I mean, you think about the memes, even just the memes. Like I've never seen this many memes of curling in my entire life. And he kind of acknowledged, like, is it better that the sport gets portrayed in a positive light or a negative light to gain attention? And the answer is probably negative. I mean, that's
I agree.
The reality, And so it's easy to say, wow, Sweden goes 11-0 and wins the Olympics in a command performance, and they become only the second team ever to win 2 gold medals. That does not move the needle as much as you can fuck off.
Yeah.
Why don't you fuck off right now, bud? Fuck. So yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of where we're at with it. And so I think there does have to be some acknowledgement that it is unfortunate, but it is unfortunate, but it is also maybe great for the sport. And I'll just say to your point, and I agree, with how it was all handled from the officiating side of things. But what I would say to that, and this is not necessarily defending world curling or the officiating, but I think there's a long history in this game of anytime the officials get involved, the immediate feeling of the top curler is fuck you.
Oh, yeah.
Don't talk to me. Don't come out here. Don't get involved in the game. Don't tell me what the rule is. You're an idiot. Like that is how top curlers think of the officials at these events. And if you are not aware of that, if you're listening to this and you've only curled at the club level, or maybe you don't curl at all, but you're just a curling fan, Robbie and I have both played the game at a high level. We've both been in situations where officials get involved, and the immediate reaction of everyone on the ice when an official walks out is, you don't know what you're doing. You're an idiot. You don't know the game better than me. So why are you out here? And I think that's where we really run into a problem, is there is no respect for the officials from the athletes. Nope. And I don't even know if that's necessarily deserved from the officials. I just think it's curlers have had, and I don't think it's a problem for the curlers either, by the way. I'm not putting down the curlers. I'm just telling you how pro curlers feel about officials being involved. And I think it's because we do hang on to this idea of we want the game to be self-policed. And so we are trying to self-police the game, and now you're the police and you're telling us how to act, and you don't know because you haven't played the game at a high level. And you're right, it's different in other sports because the referees are, even if you disagree with a call, right? You see it all the time in hockey. A guy gets a penalty and he's jawing with the ref on the way to the box. But ultimately, you understand the refs have a great understanding of the rule book, and they are enforcing the rule book on you. And there's a long-standing history of the officials being a part of the game. In curling, there is not a long-standing history of the officials getting involved in the game. And I think that's where we run into issues. And I really liked Marc Kennedy's quote about it today. He said, "For a long time, we've been playing catch up with some of the rules. The whole spirit of curling is dead, unfortunately. We've played the game at a high level long enough where we weren't looking for infractions. We don't look for infractions at Grand Slams. We don't look for that kind of stuff on tour. We just trust that the people around us aren't trying to cheat. There might be small infractions here and there, but most of the time you shrug it off because you got so much respect for the players you're playing against. This whole trying to catch people in the act of an infraction and doing anything to win a medal, it sucks. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The sport is evolving, and the powers that be will probably have to take a real good look at this and really solidify the rules going forward." And I think that is really what we're talking about here, Robbie. It's, do we want to empower the officials more? Because if we do that, like if we do agree that the spirit of curling is dead and there's too much at stake in the game now, so we cannot trust the players to self-police, then if the officials are more involved in every game moving forward, I think they would get more respect from the players and they would get more respect for their decision making. But because they're not involved in the game very often right now, when they do get involved, there's this sense of, well, you don't understand the game and you don't get what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think we're both saying the same thing. And when I meant to, when I said that world curling just doesn't look like they're setting up their officials for success, I think I'm trying to say the same thing in the sense that, is it time? Because, you had mentioned it, curling became an official medal sport in 98.
Yeah.
Like an Olympic medal is a big friggin' deal.
Yeah.
Like it leads, it's not just pride, it's money. It's, basically your future, like, can be changed.
Yeah. You win an Olympic gold medal, it changes your whole life.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of these officials, and I don't want to say anything too blunt or direct because I just don't know, but I get the feeling that a lot of them are volunteers or, an honorarium sort of thing, where imagine like Kerry Fraser and, reffing game 7 of the Stanley Cup final.
He's getting $100.
Right. And he's training. Yeah, exactly. And a case of beer after.
Yeah.
But it's just like, that's what I'm trying to say is it's just what I thought was unfortunate. It was, the biggest dilemma probably in the history of curling. If we're talking numbers and people talking about it
easily, it was not even close.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And here we are. It's just a bunch of people like I felt bad for Brent. I felt bad for the other official. And then when they doubled down, we see the one, Bobby Lammy, Rachel Homan.
Yeah.
Those were a joke.
Yeah.
Like those
for sure.
were
That's
freaking.
Yeah.
I'm a parent. I can't say the F word, but I really want to right now.
No pro curler believes either of those stones were against the spirit of the game or against the rules. No curler believes that.
No, absolutely. But Janie from Wichita, who watches curling once every 4 years, she knows. And then she's accusing these people who have dedicated their entire life to this game as cheaters when they're just not. That's the unfortunate part for me. But overall, I do agree with everything you said in terms of, eyes on the game and it definitely got people talking. I just hope it doesn't leave a legacy on the Cortina games because it has been a very kind of fun tournament to watch. I don't think there's any way to avoid that now. Yeah. It will be the controversial Olympics with the cheating, but I'm glad they pulled the officials back off the hog lines after that day. Like I was like, this is the best official is an invisible official.
Yep.
And just when you're trying to call that, give me a break from, 25 feet away. I don't think so. And you know what? The other thing too, John, is like, don't get me wrong. I know it's black and white. There's rules that can't be broken. But even if you watch the videos, like if a finger comes down and touches it, you're still 15 feet away from the target. Like if you're at the hog line.
Yeah. More probably. 130.
It's not like they have a pouch of sand in their pocket and they're like dropping it in front of the path of the other team's rocks halfway down the ice, or they have a piece of sandpaper in their pocket and they're, scratching the surface to try to get, like, that's cheating. That's cheating. Boop, in my opinion, may be a violation, but I'm not going to accuse someone and try to ruin their legacy as a cheater for that.
Anybody who knows anything about curling knows it's not cheating. It's like as soon as people were replying to me on Twitter or replying to my, the video I did with CBC Sports or whatever, as soon as they use the word cheater, I'm like, oh, okay, you don't know anything about curling. You have no clue. If someone trips someone else in hockey, you don't go, oh, they're a cheater. Oh, they're a big cheater. No, that's a rule violation. It's a penalty. Like, come on. So that, you're right. Like that is the unfortunate part. And I do think, sadly, a lot of that's coming from Swedish media. In the wake of it happening, Sweden's biggest newspaper called Marc a cheater. They wrote an article and they called Marc a cheater. So then every Swedish person goes, wow, look at this big time cheater. He's a real cheater. And that's where cheating entered the vocabulary. And so, that I agree. That would be the most disappointing part of this. Is I think if the games gets remembered for Boopgate or whatever, that's fine. I don't think that's a huge issue, but I do think that if the idea is like, let's say Jacobs wins the gold, and then the idea going forward is, well, they won because they cheated. Exactly. That would be very unfortunate and would be ludicrous. And I guess like what I would say here and what I think Marc is getting at, and we'll move on and talk about the actual curling here momentarily, but just one last point. And you and I know Oscar and we know Nick and we know those guys, and they're great curlers and they're good people. But the worst thing of all of it to me, and I think this is what Marc is driving at as well, is it's like both Nick and Oscar said after the game, we've known Marc has done this for years. Okay, well, if Marc has done it for years, why did you wait to the Olympics to call it out? And they would tell you, oh, we've been telling World Curling and we've been telling officials that he's been doing it. Well, Were you or were you not? Like, you guys played each other in the World Championships last year. You couldn't have brought it up then if he was doing it. You play each other at the slams. Couldn't have brought it up in any of those moments. Like, to me, that's the part of it where I think what Marc is driving at is it's like, were we being trapped, right? Like, was Sweden just we're waiting to the Olympics to trap us? They're 0-2. They need this win bad. Were they trying to trap us? And if they were, that really is against the spirit of the game. And it kind of begs the question, like, again, in those moments, that's where the sort of the spirit of curling, or the we can call fouls on each other, you lose a little bit of that, right? That's where it comes into, okay, maybe we do just have to have the officials watching the game all the time, because if we're going to keep little secrets of rule violations in our pocket and we're going to bring it out in the highest possible leverage moments, that's not good for curling. That's not good for the game. So that to me is, what I think Marc is driving at, and where I think the game might have to go if things like that continue. Okay, let's get to the actual standings. Canada has started quite well at 5-1. They look really strong. Lost that one game to Switzerland, but otherwise have wins over the USA, Germany, Sweden, China, Czechia. They finish off with Great Britain, Italy, and Norway. What have you made of Team Jacob's performance so far, Robbie?
Well, they look strong. And the only team that jumped out at me that you were reading off was Switzerland, who they lost to, because they look extremely strong right now.
Very much so.
In a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
But they have a tough finish, but you got to like where they are. They're 5-1. They're playing well. Brad just looks dialed in. Like, he just, he's just so happy. Like, sorry, happy to be there is the wrong way to word it, but he looks like there's nowhere else on planet Earth Brad Jacobs would rather be than right here at the Olympics, and he's making the most of it on the ice. He's thrown with a ton of confidence, trusting they're trusting in each other. They're talking, they're communicating well. And let's be honest, they created the biggest backlash, or I shouldn't say created, but they're part of the biggest backlash or controversy in the history of the sport, and they bounced back with a win.
Big time. Yeah.
So, huge, that's
huge. If
they can get by that, they can get by anything.
Yeah.
I know we'll talk about it later, but you mentioned they have Great Britain in there, still to play, and that's the number one team in the world, Bruce Mowat, but they're not very sharp right now, not even close. So that would be a big win for them. Italy, I don't know. I kind of thought that, Italy looked strong in draw one, and they just kind of never really came back. What are they at now? 3-3?
Sorry, who? Great Britain?
Italy, sorry.
Oh, Italy is 3-3. Yeah.
Italy's 3-3. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 3-3, and unfortunately, they have losses to teams they might end up in a tie with. They lost to Germany, they lost to Norway, who are both kind of above them, but they did beat Great Britain. But Italy does also have a tough finish. They have both Canada and Switzerland.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if they're 6-1 and that's their finish, I think they're in a great spot to get themselves in that playoffs. And I think they're playing well, no matter who they play against. If Bruce Mowat all of a sudden pushes a button tomorrow and wakes up and he's, old school, unbelievable Bruce, or Team Mowat, I should say, I still think Canada will be right in the game with them right now based on the way they're playing and their confidence. But right now, I do think Switzerland is the team to beat.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to talk about Canada just briefly, I think, they've looked really good. Brad is second among skips for shooting percentage, just behind Benoit, which would make sense since Switzerland's in first. And then you go on down the lineup. Marc Kennedy is fourth. Brett Gallant is fourth. Ben Hebert is fifth, but he's like 0.3% out of third. And so, and again, like Brett is fourth, but he's 0.1% out of third. Marc Kennedy is 0.5% out of third. So they're playing really well up and down the lineup. And like you said, Brad feels dialed. His worst game of the tournament so far is 82%. So it's been really, really good. Benoit is ahead of him in the standings, but has had two worse games than him. He's had a 77 and 81, but he's been bolstered by the other three games being 97, 97, and 100. Yeah. So So that helps for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. Canada looks confident. They're playing their style too. Like a lot of their wins have been that Brad Jacobs signature. We talked about it in the preview, right? Like this is a team, they love the 10-end game. They love to be able to blank as much as possible and control the hammer. And that's really what they've done against a lot of the teams that they've played. Obviously, they have Great Britain left, but other two you'd think before the tournament were winnable games, Italy and Norway. So they're looking good. But yeah, let's switch to Switzerland. 5-0 to start the week. They have that win over Canada. They also have that win over Mowat. So all of their remaining games are coming against teams below them, including 1-5 Sweden. They play Norway, Germany, Italy. They've looked fantastic. I mean, they've looked so sharp.
Yeah, they have. And I think of any team coming into it, they struck me as the most prepared and ready to go based on timing. We talked about that. They finally won that big event in Saskatoon. And then I think they lost semis to Team White in Steinbach. But man, that was a shoot out. That could have went either way. I just think that they were on a trajectory coming into this event that just looked really good in terms of timing. And I think this is the best I've ever seen this team play right through the lineup. Benoit, man, like I'm not surprised to hear that 97, 97, 100. Like those are wild numbers. Like we're not talking about the Cactus Pheasant Classic here. We're talking about the Olympic Games. And like, that's incredible. And I think as long as he stays in that world, I don't want to say no one's going to beat them, but they're going to be so difficult to beat. Benoit is just, you can tell he just wants it way more than he ever has. And I think I think he knows this is the closest of a chance he's ever had in his life. And he really wants to make the most of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's the best team he's had. The whole team looks really good. Yannick Schwaller's in second for thirds. Sven Mikkel is in fifth for seconds. And then you have Pablo Lachaux-Couchepin in second for leads. Team percentage-wise, they're leading the field by 1%. So they're 1, Canada's 2, Great Britain is 3. But yeah, it's been really, they've looked fantastic. And yeah, like you said, we kind of saw signs of it. They won that first slam and they've really been dialed in throughout the event so far. Now we've got a couple of teams at 4-2 that are maybe a little bit surprising. Magnus Ramsfjell of Norway and Danny Casper of the USA, both sitting at 4-2 right now. Both have fairly difficult finishes. Norway still has to play Switzerland and Canada. Meanwhile, Danny still has to play Great Britain. So he's got a little bit of an easier finish, does Danny. He's already lost to Switzerland and Canada, but he's won all of his other games, and he's also beat Norway. So he has that potential tiebreaker there. They finish against China, Italy, and then Bruce Mowat and Great Britain. But it's kind of looking like the way it's shaping up, very possible that one of those two teams sneak into the playoffs in Norway and the USA.
Yeah, I'll start with Norway. I really got to watch them. I find on the men's side, sorry, I don't know why, but I find myself flipping through a lot of games because I use CBC Gem.
Yeah.
And so they have all 4 games there.
Yep.
And especially and nothing against Jacob's team because it works for them, but 10 ends, no blank rule, and they're on the ice. I mean, sometimes I just need a break from the blanks, if that makes sense. So I'll just go flip around, check out another game if it looks like it's just going to be a blank. And I stumbled on the US-Norway game, and the Ghost Man got up really big early on, but Norway, something switched in them about 3/4 of the way through, like N6 or N7. And they ended up coming, I think they scored 2, 4, scored 3, maybe stole. Anyway, it went to an extra, I think, or it was tied up in 10. I think it was 8-8. But it was a massively, I don't have the line score in front of me, but there was something in Team Ramsfjell that game that really switched. And then I turned them on this morning as well. They were playing Great Britain. And they looked sharp. They won that game. They beat Mowat. So they're playing well. They're certainly playing better than I've seen them play on tour all year. But their situation coming home, I think they're going to have to level up again. If they're going to have Switzerland, if they're going to have Canada, they're playing well enough to win those games, but I just don't think that gets them what they're going to need. long story short, I think the U.S. is in a much better spot to make the playoffs than Norway.
Yeah, I'd agree. You still got to play Canada and Switzerland, which is tough. And as we said, like Danny's already absorbed those losses. So he's at 2 losses, but they're both to the top 2 teams in the field. Whereas Norway has absorbed 2 losses. They lost to Germany and to Danny Casper. So yeah, they're in a tough spot for sure, especially if you look at Norway. They do have the tiebreaker over Mowat, the head-to-head, but again, you end up in a cluster. Maybe it goes to DSC. That could be troubling as well. Just I'll look at the DSC really quickly. Norway's 3rd last in DSC, so that's not great for them either. But yeah, I agree. Like they're sort of outperforming expectations. They kind of came in. They could be loose. They could play just their game, have fun. And it's been good to see. I don't really have anything else to add to what you said. So let's move on to Danny Casper. And you brought him up a little bit there, but I think again, another team playing loose, having fun. You get those
feeding off the energy.
Yeah, totally. And you get those 2 losses out of the way early, right? Like you lose to Switzerland and Canada, you're 1-2, but then you get a nice stretch of games with Germany, Sweden, Norway. They've got China coming up early this morning. So as you're listening to this, they could be in a really, really good spot, looking like they could make the playoffs. What have you made of Danny Casper?
I think it's just a fun story to watch. Like they're so young. I remember talking to him like in the dressing room or by the dressing rooms in Steinbach, and he was worried about it was either getting his work shifts covered or getting an extension on an assignment, like at college, like at university. And I'm like, this guy is so much younger and he's going to the Olympics. Like, this is crazy. And I was going to say this about Peterson too, Team Peterson on the women's side. But for the U.S. curlers, it's so different because if they get on a roll, at the Worlds, for example, they're going to have a lot of American curling fans cheering them on and giving them support and trying to get some momentum going for them. But the Olympics is so different because for the first time, everybody's watching. Like you have 350 million people or something. A lot of them are focusing on curling for the first time ever. So they're getting all these, messages of support, celebrities, that kind of American sports culture. And they're just leaning into that so much. And you can just feel the energy. They're doing such a good job of just staying pumped up, staying in the moment, not losing their I guess focus would be the word, just really soaking it all in. Like Danny's 24?
Yep.
And here he is about to make a run at the playoffs at the Olympics for Team USA in curling. Like that is a story in itself. They're going to have to, like the playoffs at the Olympics is just so different than the playoffs anywhere else with the pressure and just what you got to expect the level your opposition is going to be at as well. It'll be interesting to see how they can handle that if they do get to that scenario, but they do have winnable games coming home. So some work to do yet at 4-2, but if I were them, I'd be really happy with how this week has gone so far. Because for me, it was all about how they were going to get out of that first, half. And here we are 2/3 of the way through it. You're 4-2. I think if anyone offered them 4-2 2 weeks ago, they're taking that every time. So now that they're settled in, they're on a roll. They can feed off that momentum. They could go on a run.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And you're right. Like, I do think overall, like the percentages will have to get better, especially as they get into these tougher games. They're 6th in the field as a team overall. Danny's sitting at 7th. Ben is near the bottom for seconds. Luke is mid-pack for thirds. Aiden is leading for leads. And that's kind of propping up the team percentage a bit. But you do have to wonder if maybe there's a little bit of good fortune on their side as far as looking at their team percentage and where they are in the standings. But yeah, I think, it's a dangerous team when the expectations just aren't there. Like 2 years ago, we weren't even talking about Danny making the Olympics. It was Dropkin versus Schuster. And the story was, is this going to be the year that Corey Dropkin can finally unseat John Schuster and make it to the Olympics? And so, yeah, you talk about a team, you've already mentioned it. Their average age is so low. It's a team that you feel pretty confident they're going to get back there. And so, yeah, it's just, they're a team that's going to get back there, and so you can kind of play with a little bit of looseness, as opposed to, Canada probably has some players retiring, Sweden probably has some players retiring, Italy probably has some players retiring. So, these are like, you're going up against teams where it's last Olympics and competitive nations where you don't even know if they're going to get back there. Whereas the path forward for Danny, he's making his first one at 24. Like, he could be the next John Schuster, where he makes the next 4 or 5 Olympics in a row. So I think that comes with its own sort of looseness, and he's just a loose guy anyway. So the idea that you can kind of be at the Olympics, the most high pressure environment, it's just tough.
And it's showing.
Yeah, for sure. It's tough for the other teams. I mean, like, it's tough to play a team like that, where they're just kind of like, yeah, we're just here to have fun. Like, everything is good. We're having a good time. So yeah, nice to see for them. The next kind of important thing to talk about here as we record this, Bruce Mowat and Great Britain, the only team of all 20 on the men's and women's sides that I guaranteed would win a medal, is sitting at 4-3, and they have games left against Canada and the USA. They're the only team that's played 7 games in the field. But yeah, Robbie, I mean, they lost to Italy, they lost to Switzerland. Losing to Switzerland, whatever, that could happen. That's number 1 and number 2 in the world playing each other. But they lose to Italy and they lose to Norway. What are you making of Bruce Mowat being at 4-3 and potentially on the outside looking in?
I think it's very similar to what we discussed with Team Homan. They're the team to beat. They had the target on their back, didn't get off to the start they wanted. But I think they have an opportunity. They still have Canada to play. And I think if they can win that game, that could serve as that moment they need to kind of spark them, give them that confidence back, and remind themselves that they are number 1 in the world. When that team's sharp, I think this was the headline when they released a clip of our last podcast about this. When they're sharp, I just don't see who beats them. I think I said that word for word. And they're capable of being sharp, but they're pretty dull right now. You got to expect, with their experience, their coaching, they have a great coaching staff behind them, a great support system. You got to expect them to bounce back. And I think if they can kind of grind out a big win against a big team, that being Canada, and we talked about in the mixed doubles wrap up that how big a target that Maple Leaf is on your back, that could pump them up, that could refire up their engines and get them where they need to be. And if that's the case, that will be the team to watch, in my opinion, even though they don't look like it right now.
Yeah, it's just, again, is it that Olympic pressure? And it kind of goes to what you were saying earlier about, when we were talking about the women's field, and like, did Hasselborg even peak too early, like in this week? Like within this week, did she peak too early? And you kind of wonder that about Bruce. He's been the world number 1 for the last 2 years. He's been a team that's felt unassailable, and not saying that they peaked too soon, but like, that brings its own pressure, and so I think, you're coming in world number 1, you have really good records against all of these teams, probably winning records head to head against every team in this field. And so, yeah, we're seeing a little bit. And I think it's funny because, Rachel's at 3-3 right now, but did start 1-3. And we're already, seeing a little bit of the pitchforks coming out, and, oh, is this a disaster for Canada? And, she's been so good. And what happens if she misses the playoffs, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, guess what? It's happening on the men's side too. Bruce Mowat has also been the world number 1 with a bullet. And now he is at the Olympics and feeling the pressure. Like, it's just a real thing. And, as much as you can do the previews, and you and I literally did hours of previews for these Olympics, we said, how many times did we say the phrase, but it's the Olympics? And there's always a team that surprises, because there's always teams that come into the Olympics in different places in their team's trajectory. There's teams that are coming in with expectations of winning gold. There's teams that are coming in with expectations of medaling. And then there are teams that come in with no expectations. And sometimes the team with no expectations is able to just kind of find their way to some big wins. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. So yeah, I mean, that Bruce Mowat, Brad Jacobs game, this episode is probably coming out like just as that game is ending. So maybe we'll have a little more clarity. I mean, I think if Bruce Mowat drops to 4-4, he's in real trouble, because he does have that loss to Norway on his,
that's a good point,
on his card. But Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where they end up. And then finally, Robbie, maybe we'll talk. We've got Germany at 3-3, Italy at 3-3. That's kind of about where we expected them to be. We've got China at 1-5, which is maybe a little bit surprising, but again, I think you and I both kind of had them in the lower half of the field coming in. Czechia at 0-6. That's not a surprise. They're like world number 35 coming into the tournament. But probably the last team that bears talking about a little bit here, Sweden at 1-5. They've been, Nicholas Edin has won a medal at the last 3 Olympics, defending gold medalist, won the Europeans in the fall. We kind of talked about, could they turn it around in time for the Olympics, and kind of appears they can't. I don't really see a world with how these standings are shaping up where 4-5 gets you into the playoffs, and they do still have to play Switzerland. So we're probably looking at a Swedish team that will not make the playoffs here at the Olympics. Your thoughts on
that? I mean, based on their play this week, I can't say I'm surprised. I expected to see a much sharper team of Dean. They've certainly taken some losses that they shouldn't have. I mean, on paper. But man, Nick's been such a fiend in the sport for so long, and he's been around, and it's no secret that I'm not trying to make excuses for him here, but he's got to be sore. Like, the injuries have got to be adding up. Like, I'm not trying to start any rumors or anything, but one has got to think that, the end of his on ice career is probably soon.
Yeah, it's probably after the Worlds this year, most likely.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm trying to start any rumors or anything, but let's be honest. I don't know how many surgeries he's had, but it was like we were all kind of waiting. But we're all just kind of waiting to see this team turn around, and not just at the Olympics, but I found all year, even on the slams and even last year, and they just didn't. And you just got to wonder if that, the gas tank is just getting a little bit empty in terms of chemistry within the 4 of them. And 4 great guys, 4 really, really good curlers, but they just haven't been able to translate it into the success. I know there's some world championships in there. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but a team that should have performed a lot better on the slam circuit over the years. I know we talked about how, a few of them saying that they're not a team that's built for the slams. The style of play at the slams doesn't benefit them. But I think this week just proved that there's almost a changing of the guard, and there's some breakthrough teams coming through that they're not just opening the door quietly and hoping to sneak in. They're breaking it down, and it is what it is. It's called sports, and shit happens.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Nicholas too, he's 9th in the field for skips, and honestly, he could be 10th. He's being propped up by a 99%. So he had a 99% in their game against China. That's their only win so far. And then his numbers for the rest of the games are 69, 61, 79, 63, 76. So without that 99, he might even be the last ranked skip in this field. And we just don't see those numbers from Nicholas Edin. No. I thought Mike Harris astutely kind of pointed out on the broadcast, and I don't know if this is like information that he's gotten from Nick or he's just speculating, because obviously all of Nicholas's surgeries are very public. And the fact that he's had so many, it's all very public. But he was saying that Nicholas can't generate the power anymore for peels. So it's a little bit more handsy. It's a little bit more arm extension to generate that power. And look, some skips can do that extremely well. They grow up doing that arm extension, particularly in women's curling. You see it a little bit more where, when they're learning to throw heavy weight, they have that arm extension. So they're very accurate with the extension. But if you're someone who never had an extension, and you could generate that power just from your leg drive, and now all of a sudden you have to add an extension on those peel shots.
Yep.
That's a lot of trouble. And then you add into the fact Oscar's 7th among thirds. And, again, Oscar's one of those guys we talk about as one of the best players to ever play the game. So it's the combination of those two guys not playing very well obviously has them where they are. Christopher Sundgren's tied for 3rd among leads. Rasmus Vrano is 3rd among seconds by himself. So it really is just coming down to that back end. And, we'll do the postmortems, and if Nicholas fully announces his retirement, we'll talk a little bit more about what that might mean for the other 3 guys. When we get there, we would be getting ahead of ourselves to talk about that. But yeah, this does feel a little bit like a classic sort of retirement, a classic where, unfortunately, maybe they're getting retired instead of retiring on their own accord, or at least in Nicholas's case, that, just, all the miles over the years, doesn't quite have his fastball anymore. And unfortunate because, he's made 4 Olympics before this one and made the playoffs in all of them. So too bad to see them kind of go down like this, but shouldn't take anything away from the fact that, you're talking about 4 of the greatest Olympic curlers of all time.
Oh, no doubt. And no matter what happens at this Olympics, I don't think, Nicholas Edin's legacy is going to be shattered in any way, or, and those guys will all, Oscar and Rasmus, the guys who keep going, they're going to land somewhere, and they'll put something together if Nicholas does retire, I should say. But yeah, not their week. I know that's cliche, and I know Brent Lang loves hearing that line. It just wasn't meant to be, or wasn't their week, but someone's got to lose.
Yep. Sometimes it truly just is not your week. So there is your midweek Olympic recap from your friendly neighborhood Broom Brothers. Obviously, lots of intrigue on both sides of the sheet with the men and women. Lots to play for. And as we say, once this episode comes out, probably things have already changed from what we've talked about. But hopefully that was still informative for you, especially our take on the Broom controversy, or the Boop controversy. I keep calling it the Broom controversy because it sounds like the same thing. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how things go throughout the medal round. Robbie and I will be back with you early next week, recapping what happened when the dust settled, who ended up on the podium, who ended up missing the playoffs, maybe a little bit about where these teams go from here. We're going to have an Olympic recap for you. That'll be early next week. And then maybe I'll sit down with one of the gold medalists as well. We'll see what happens, but lots to come still here on Broom Brothers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Goldline for sponsoring this episode. If you want to watch a video of this episode, it's available on YouTube. You can see me frantically looking at curling standings and clicking links the whole time that we are talking as it's going on.
Me playing with a chewed up highlighter.
That's available on our YouTube page. You can give us a follow there, subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to find us on social media, just type in the Broom Brothers. We're on everything. You'll find us there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week with your full Olympics recap. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you then. Goodbye.